Welcome everybody to our session today. We have a lot to chat about, so I'm just going to hop to it. If you could go to the next slide, please, Sierra. Thank you so much. So today we are going to be talking about the ingredients needed to make lasting change. At the center of this is the story of our CGLR community in Indian River County, Florida. This quote by author James Clear from Atomic Habits really resonates with how this community has achieved remarkable impact in grade level reading. Listen very carefully for how this team focused on developing a system and a process in addition to the set of goals that has moved them forward. The key for them is about building the system that is sustainable and responsive to the needs of their community. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we're just going to level set, first of all, with what our common ground is for the campaign for grade level reading. And all of you are joining us today as a part of our larger network and our system itself. So the mission of the campaign for GLR is to disrupt the generational cycle of poverty by improving the prospects for early school success for children, especially those growing up in economically challenged and otherwise marginalized families. So our two critical inflection points, of course, are the development on the track of end of kindergarten and also grade level reading by the end of third grade. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. And if you could launch the poll, we recognize that we are all part of something bigger. So we do have a poll that we're going to launch here in a second. If you could please select which best represents where you're coming to us from, which part of the sector you are from. This is really going to help level set our panel as well, so they can see which part of the piece of the puzzle you are. To fulfill our promise, we need all of the parts to come together. So that means our local networks are more than just one star in the map, which we have many stars, but it's going to take all of us, basically, no matter what role you may play for your local community. And today we will see how this plays out in one of our exemplary coalitions in Indian River County. So we know that we need these pieces to move the needle. We need national experts in the field to keep us all grounded in research and best practices, especially those on the leading edge of implementation science about how to scale and replicate best practices within a school system. And you'll hear from Dr. Hogan and Dr. Thompson in this respect. We need a community coalition and a backbone organization to build the public will and embrace the shared agenda that creates the partnerships centered on the agenda. We need that backbone to focus everyone in deep collaboration with community leaders to hold that agenda over the long run. That backbone organization will also create the cultural shift needed to seeing investments in education as prevention, with schools to accelerate teaching and to provide accessible after-school and summer programming to children, especially those who need more dosage beyond the school day. The backbone will also support with parents to improve kindergarten readiness and connect them to the resources to be their child's first and most important teacher. And you'll see that in the Learning Alliance. Third, we need a close partnership with the local school system, one in which the leader builds the habits at every level within the district towards excellence in teaching and learning practices aligned with the science of reading and what is best for all kids. And we'll hear from Dr. Moore in this respect. Finally, we need a site that embodies all of these ingredients and functions holistically and delivering the promise for children. And we'll see this when we hear about the Moonshot School, which Leslie will share. So these are all the components that we will see and learn from today. Sierra, if you could go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce our moderators today. They are the co-founders together and leaders of the Learning Alliance, Barbara Hammond and Liz Remington. All right, so I'll go ahead and leave it to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Malai. If you could turn to our first slide. I still have the poll up for some reason on mine, but I'll just speak to the slide. So policy, practice, performance, that's been, our quest is how do we align those three to create a literacy capital of the nation? And the way to do that is through public-private partnerships and systems integration. So we're all on a learning journey. We learn from others, and we welcome you today to learn from ours as we learn from yours. Next slide, please. Our story, just to give it some grounding, Liz Remington and Ray Oglethorpe and I started the Learning Alliance 15 years ago. We call it the Two Moms and a Philanthropist story. All of our children were struggling to learn to read, and we started the Learning Alliance because our kids were at private school, and the private schools didn't have the science of reading and the science of learning policies and practices. So what became a personal odyssey and the angst of what it took to get our kids reading became let's get all kids reading, and a beautiful partnership with the public school system. You'll see on the right, but PBS did an early study on our work, but we will not play that video today. Next slide, please. Where is Vero Beach, Florida? It's on the east coast of Florida, sort of across from Tampa. And while we have a wealthy retired community, we look very much like the nation. We have 69% of our kids economically disadvantaged in third grade. We are a majority district now, 51% minority students. More than 2/3 of our schools, 70% of our 13 elementary schools are actually Title I with about 18% ESE, and the total district has a population of about 17,000 students. Next slide.
So we always say our name and our logo says it all. We are the Learning Alliance. The star at the center represents the child and all the people that need to come around to support and uplift and uphold that star. So the ability to reach our 90% goal, the idea that we're going to get 90% of our children's third grade proficient at reading by the end of third grade, that's our moonshot moment goal, requires that we ally everybody together, from schools to community partners to parents, you name it, and then learn together. We are on a learning journey to learn together. What does it take to be successful? Next slide. And our framing question, and this is the question that guides the work of the Learning Alliance, but also the work of our community. What does it take to achieve this 90% literacy goal by third grade, such that we grow literate, compassionate, creative citizens who will improve our world? And that is a big, lofty, important question, but I think that question speaks to how everybody can step in, as Ralph Smith from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading says, we need to get out of the bleachers and onto the playing field. Answering this question, it's up to everybody to figure out where they live inside of helping to form that answer to do what's best for our youngest citizens.
So our moonshot programs have evolved based on need over the last 15 years, and they really are about integrating the science of learning and the science of reading into the ecosystem, our birth through third grade ecosystem across our community. And our work focuses on really, as Liz said, making sure every child has the opportunity to become literate, compassionate, creative citizen who can improve our world. So our 4 areas are after school and summer tutoring, because some kids need extra dosage, and that's really in kindergarten through third grade. Family partnerships, which is really helping families better prepare their kids for kindergarten. In-school coaching and professional learning, and that's really helping accelerate what's going on in terms of the learning journey of our schools and our school district. And community engagement. Without the community holding this goal over time, the work would not sustain. It would get knocked out by political cycles as new leaders within our community or school district change every three years. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
So the after school and summer work, our Moonshot Academies after school, these are learning labs for teachers and students, and they do 2 things. They really look at being diagnostic and prescriptive in terms of where a child is on their reading development and what do they need in that space. And they also have a second layer to it, is what does it take to really bring in high engagement strategies such that the kids can really learn content knowledge. It's a learning lab for teachers and students. So it's a space for the kids to grow and thrive, but also for the teachers to hone their craft and develop the talents and skills that they need to be structured for success in the classroom. On the next slide, we talk about the next area, which is in-school coaching and professional learning. So again, taking that into the school. What does that shoulder-to-shoulder coaching look like? What does professional learning for educators look like in the various spaces? Next slide.
So our family partnerships, you'll see the reading rocket. We turned a bus into a reading rocket. It goes into our communities and it creates fun, literate engagements with families where they live, especially in our pockets of poverty and underserved communities. So we are really modeling for parents how do you read, talk, play, and sing with your child in a way that unlocks their brain so that they are ready for kindergarten. Next slide. This work began in 2011 we launched our Moonshot Goal about the same time the campaign launched, the campaign for grade level reading, and they emphasized us how important community engagement was. So we have always built that arm very strongly and have had all of our leading officials, city council, county commissioners, school board, executive roundtables, and nonprofits come around this journey and annually proclaim that they are a moonshot leader and hold this goal with us. And if you look at the next slide, when we started the work, we understood that when you're working on complex problems such as education, you have to move from silos and competition to collaboration and finally integration. I'm not sure we understood at that point what integration meant. We thought collaboration was the be all and the end all. But what integrate we are now, and you will hear stories today about how integrated we are with the school system. We have resources embedded in the school system. Our in-school coaching and professional development is 25 positions, K-3 in the school system, supporting the systems that David Moore is building. And really what that requires is moving from turf to trust, and getting rid of egos and figuring out what's best by kids. So I think you'll hear that as we move forward. Next slide.
Okay, so you've heard about our why and how our work started. So now it's time to hear from the panelists and for them to step into what is their why? Why are they invested in this work and what motivates them? So let me start in the order in which people are speaking. How about Dr. Tiffany Hogan?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Tiffany Hogan. I am a professor at MGH Institute of Health Professions and a research associate at Harvard Medical School. My training is as a clinical speech language pathologist. And what I noticed is that children who had difficulty with early speech and language would come back to me after a few years having struggles with reading. And that led me to obtain a PhD. And now I've been studying the connection between speech, language, and literacy in young children for some time now. And I look to see how this work will be actually implemented in schools. And my goal is to help my school partners to create sustainable systems that include the entire community and that will help children learn how to read and function in life. And it was a real opportunity for me as a scientist to get to work with Dr. Moore and the Learning Alliance and the entire district to think about how to improve those systems.
And then how about Dr. Moore? What is your why?
You're muted.
All right, now you can hear me, right? Perfect. I think that's a very straightforward answer. Every single child, regardless of where they live, deserves to have a quality education. And in Florida specifically, we need to leverage partnerships and think about what teaching and learning looks like, and drastically transform to meet the needs of all kids. And that can't be done by a school district in isolation. It requires partnerships. It requires some bold thinking. And it requires alignment. So to me, it's making sure every kid has that opportunity, which is public education.
And Dr. Nell, why are you invested in this work?
Hey everyone, what a great question. And I could say echo to Tiffany and Dr. Moore. I really am in this work from the beginning, and my roots go back to Bush, Alaska, and working with marginalized populations. So I feel like the campaign for grade level reading is really holding true to my heart too, and just ensuring that children are on target with the resources they need, and the educators have the knowledge they need to maximize the potential of each ecosystem, each community. And I'm really grateful to be here with the Learning Alliance and Indian River School District, because I believe in this partnership and that they are a demonstration district for many to move forward in partnership in public education, because we can do this for all children.
Fantastic. And Leslie, what is your why?
Wow, really, the only thing I can probably add to that is going back to what Nell said, going back to my roots. I'm third generation native of Indian River County, and just the legacy of this community empowers and inspires me to contribute to its growth and creating a positive impact for our future generations. And one way I can do that is through literacy and reaching our 90% goal, doing that together.
Great. So Tiffany, Dr. Hogan is an expert in implementation science. She's an expert in a lot of things. If you ever get an opportunity to hear her speak, it is well worth the effort. She has also done a lot of extensive research around developmental language disabilities and really renamed and reshaped that. But we thought it would be interesting, before Dr. Moore really talks about what he's doing to create systems change. What does the science tell us about what this looks like and what does it mean? Tiffany, you want to speak about your work?
Yes, great. And I will start with the slide that has I think it was the one we just left upon. Great. So as I mentioned, I was a clinical researcher, and I'm also a mom of 3 neurodivergent children. So one of my children has autism, one has ADHD, and one has dyslexia. So I have the lived experience as a parent and also as a researcher that, prior to having these children, has been studying the connection between speech, language, and literacy. And it's been a real honor to not only be a mother to these children, but to also go along with them on their journey as they're learning how to read and navigate the school systems. So the work I do, we write grants with partners across the US to the federal government. We get funding, and then we ask research questions around speech, language, and literacy. So we're contributing to what's been dubbed as the science of reading. And that's some research findings that tell us how children are developing reading and what are some of the best practices or evidence-based practices for these children. But it was very frustrating to me as a scientist to be putting out all of these articles. And then when I would enter into the schools as a parent and also as a collaborator and partner, I would see all of the barriers to actually getting that science into practice. And that led me to be interested in thinking about this science called the science of implementation, or implementation science. So in these pictures, you can see this is me, working with schools. This is my family, and this is me working with school collaborators looking at data. So I'll take the next slide. So in being in a medical center, I have the benefit of being on some teams to think about research questions as they relate to practice. And so in the medical field, which is also a complex field, a lot like a complex school system, and their ultimate goal is that they want to treat patients with their best evidence. And so that system realized about 20 years ago now that they would also create this evidence and it wasn't making it into practice. And so implementation science is really the process of closing the gap between the evidence that we know works and what's actually done in everyday practice. This is an example of a framework. There's actually over 100 frameworks for implementation science, but this is one of the most common ones. And this one has been really taken from the medical field and applied more in the educational setting. So implementation science can be applied really in any complex system in which you're trying to close a gap between what we know to do and what's happening every day. And I'm just going to point out a few key factors associated with implementation science that I think will tie really nicely to what we're seeing happening in this collaboration that we're discussing today. So first, what we know is that in this active implementation framework, there's effective practice. So this is the practice, the evidence-based practice. This is the science that tells us what we need to do so that children can learn how to read. Now, the effective implementation is what are we doing that's actually creating an environment in which evidence-based practice can flourish. Some of those factors are to create teams that can enable, and that's enabling the actual effective implementation, and also having leadership and focused messaging. And also thinking about continuous improvement. So it's not something where you make a system and then you walk away. It's this continuous improvement. Next slide. So what I was drawn to implementation science because it really acknowledges that children are contained in communities and systems that affect their learning. So it's not that they're just going into a classroom and the classroom is where the learning occurs. They're really housed in this complex system. And again, this is what I was so drawn to, really learning about what's happening there, because this is a good example of a community organization with a school district that's actually pulling together and acknowledging how that system of community impacts children actually every day in the classroom. Next slide. This is a visual that my colleague and I created. That's the first really representation of implementation science from the medical field as it relates to schools. And what I want to point out here is not the details necessarily, but really the visual here, because that's what we wanted to really highlight, is that at the center, what you'll see is something that's called innovation. That's a generic term for things that we know we should be doing every day in the classroom. This would be like systematic explicit phonics instruction and meeting children where they are in their needs. That would be an example of an innovation. But what you can see is that innovation, or the ability to actually act on the science of reading, is buried under all of these layers. And those layers are representing the complex ecosystem that teachers, school districts, communities, and we're most focused on children, the ecosystems that children are living in. So the first one would be their immediate family. So what's happening in their immediate family related to housing stability, food, security, how are we involving the family structure from not only the day they enter school, but all the way from birth. The next one would be what we call the educator encounter, but that's basically the idea of what is the teacher able to do every single day? Do they have time to make plans, to read about science, to work in teams? The next one is the educator themselves, like how well are they educated on this? How do they hear their voices in what they're doing? And the inner and outer setting, that's the community broadly. So it's the immediate community, it's the state community, it's the larger country community, and then you have the world. So all of the things that are happening that impact the decisions that are being made, either resource-wise, policy-wise, laws, and such. So implementation science is a cyclical, continuous process in which we first look at all these factors and say what's happening that is what we call a barrier, what needs to be worked on, and what's happening that's great that we need to do more of. And how do we think about strategies to improve what we want to see improved across time? And then we have to continually evaluate to see if this is working so that it is truly sustainable. If we do these things, which is a process, it means that we're involving all of the community members. We have strong leadership and support of teachers and students and their families. And what we'll see is a continual improvement. And I would say that my experience working with this group is that they are really at the cutting edge to think through all the complexities, because oftentimes we'll see a focus on 1, 2, or 3, not considering the entire ecosystem. So it's very exciting to have the opportunity to think about how to utilize the tools of implementation science to improve the literacy outcomes in children.
Next slide. So it's my honor to congratulate in front of this esteemed group, Dr. David Moore, who was just last week named Superintendent of the Year in the state of Florida, 67 districts. So well deserved. I would say that the Learning Alliance, David came to Indian River County 40 days before COVID, or 44 days before COVID. And we've witnessed, 3 or 4 superintendents before David Moore. And we've really witnessed the transformation from good intentions to a system that really delivers on those intentions. So I'm honored to introduce you all to Dr. David Moore and hear what it is that he has done to transform this school district from a systems perspective to focus on building instructional excellence in every classroom every day.
All right, am I on? Can you hear me? Are we good?
Yes.
All right, so it's not me, it's we, but thank you, Barbara. And here in the school district of Indian River County, upon looking for a place to serve as superintendent, one of the things that was intriguing is when you visit the community versus where it was when you look at their academic outcomes. There were 2 different realities. A great place to live. Yes, there's a high level of poverty and the need is great across the community. But when you compared the outcomes, there was a tremendous disconnect. Also, there was a community who had a really solid understanding as to literacy being a very, very important area to focus in on. Some of the work the Learning Alliance had done prior to my arrival around awareness made this a town, a community that was ripe for continuous improvement and change. And I said it briefly during my introduction. At the end of the day, we as a school district are fighting for the right to educate our community's children. And I believe public education is the absolute best choice. There's a level of accountability in terms of the academic outcome. In Florida, with choice programming and public funding for private schooling, you lose some of that accountability, and the quality of education, which purely exists to invest in the state, invest in the community, may be diluted if you have individuals coming in selling an environment or selling a dream, but not being able to produce quality outcomes and rights. So this is a battle for hard work. And School District of Indian River County, we look at 3 very specific areas. Outpace. And when we say outpace, our goal is to reinvent what public education looks like. We're very forward facing in the fact that we want to challenge our principals and challenge our community partners to walk away from the traditional public education experience and recreate what that experience is for today's child within our current community. And we need to know if we are not willing to embrace change, ultimately, we will continue to lose students, we will continue to lose funding, and I think it ultimately has a negative impact on the community. Outperform. We are unwavering in our expectations in terms of student outcomes. We're going to talk a bit about implementation and the implementation of science, but at the foundation of implementation is accountability, understanding your roles, your responsibilities, understanding the system or the process or the procedures that need to be done, understanding the science of reading, but being accountable for those things, those behaviors, those habits, those systems really helps drive change across the totality of the system. In our district, we've had a tremendous level of success. We're a state that grades schools and districts. We're a AA district for the last 2 years. The district has never done that. We're very, very proud of that. We've gone from 38th, and we'll show a slide a little bit later, in academic performance across the state to number 9, a top 10 district, with a pandemic in the middle. So we really are holding ourselves accountable to our way of work, which leads to outperformance. And then we say preserve. We're very intentional about preserve. Indian River County is a town that embraces the small town feel. And we talk a lot about outpacing and outperforming, but we're not walking away from what makes Indian River County, Indian River County. So maintaining a sense of community, a sense of belonging, really foundational to what will be our success. We want to be as the slide says, the very first and the only choice for educating children in Indian River County. As we jump in to our next slide, that was the cue. We really focus, and I'll talk about 3 specific areas. A lot about habits. We really are working with our principals and our teachers to understand their actions and align their actions to results and creating habits where it just becomes second nature, whether it is an instructional initiative, whether it is differentiating instruction, whether it is debriefing a classroom walkthrough, understanding their creating habits that yield success. So we spend a lot of time talking about how adults implement their practices, how they spend their time. We spend a lot of time problem solving, not talking about the problem, but defining action that we are going to take based on what we observe today. So a lot of times in organizations have the best intentions, as Barbara was saying. That's 100% true. They talk a lot. We're very strategic and specific in saying every conversation is going to lead to very specific action. And we want those conversations to take place as close to children as possible. So this is not a district that is top heavy. We're trying to give all of our authority away from a superintendent's perspective, getting the authority to each and every single person in the organization, understanding what decisions every individual has the authority to make in making those decisions, and then pushing that authority down through quality development to get the decision made. We want to be a system that learns fast. And if a teacher has to get problem solved with the department chair, then the instructional coach, then the assistant principal, then the district support person, it takes weeks to have a decision. But if we can empower that person with quality development, quality conversations and reflection, we can take that decision that takes sometimes weeks or never gets made. You're still waiting for the person to respond to an email, to being made in the hallway right outside of that classroom or during the very next planning session based on the reflection. What you've done is you've accelerated the ability to evaluate practice, to evaluate instruction, and to determine collectively what our next steps are. And then goals, as I was saying earlier, we are committed to achieving, we've set very, very ambitious targets across our entire system. And we have someone at every school site, as well as the district, attached to each component of just not the school's grade, but the components ultimately of students. So we leave no stone unturned and we take authority. It's just not the principals responsible for the outcome. Yes, they are, but they have assistant principals, they have instructional coaches, and we're able to tie, we know you will be successful at the end of the year if you hit this specific outcome. And we really don't have to worry about that specific outcome if you're following the system and you've created the habits. So we spend a lot of time observing instructional practices. We talk a lot about data in this district, but what drives data or improves data is instruction. It's the habits, it's the behaviors, it's the daily actions. The data is a validation or a reinforcement that those behaviors and habits are in fact improving quality instruction. So we think we're one step in front of the data now. We use data as a reinforcement to our specific outcomes, and really hold ourselves accountable to doing the things that we know work. And this is a visual that really looks at our continuous improvement cycle. A typical and continuous improvement model in most states or school districts goes through a continuous improvement model that takes place over the course of the year. They do their initial assessment, they write their school improvement plan, and then in January or December, they evaluate the first half of the school year and they make their modifications based on that mid-year review, and then they go forward to the next level. Not in Indian River County, because we want to think as fast as possible. So we've taken a year of continuous improvement and we break it down and we do that entire cycle within a 9-week period, within 9 weeks. So what that basically means is, we want to create urgency, and you're going to hear leaders, and you always have, talk about urgency. You want to define urgency, clearly articulate what needs to be done in 7 weeks. And that's going to help an individual focus specifically on the actions that need to take place. So we are very, very intentional about thinking as fast as we possibly can. I know this is a slide that it's pretty hard to see, but what you see is we have our instructional systems that are aligned from the outside of the system. The green slides look at how we support or feed information into our school site and continuous improvement model. Every single person in this district is designed to support this continuous improvement cycle. Our next slide is actually a video that I'd like to share. No, it's not a video that I would like to share. It is our growth over the course of the last 3 years. So what this slide is, it looks at the 66 districts across the state of Florida. And in the 66 districts across it's a spaghetti model. So if you're from Florida, we look at spaghetti models whenever a hurricane is coming. This is a different kind of spaghetti model. But what you'll realize here, the bold green on the top is the rate of improvement in all academic areas for Indian River County. So for each of the last 3 years, we have outpaced or outgrown academically all other districts in the state of Florida. And we are very, very excited about that. We like to brag about that, and we want to continue to brag about that. Now I'm going to set up the video. Barbara was referencing policy performance and practice. This is now an annual conference that we have where we invite individuals like yourselves to come in and check out what's taking place at our Moonshot School. Check out our partnership with the Learning Alliance and our community-wide effort to focus in on hitting that 90% in 3rd grade. And this is a kind of a summary video of our performance policy practice that we had last year. Go ahead. Day 2 was a very unique day for us. It was the opportunity for us to bring all of the individuals together and highlight what instructional leadership looks like. Datacom is the opportunity for us to align support and accountability. And at the end of the day, it is using data to make informed decisions. That was 3 of our principals sitting down and speaking about where their data is and what their plans are to absolutely hit the goal that they have for themselves. And then using all of the system's resources to ensure each principal has what he or she needs to move this system forward to ensure that that school can obtain the goal of being an A.
The most impressive thing that I saw today was the capacity and leadership skill of the building principals, right alongside with the lead of Dr. Moore. How they embraced just the process and the system and answered questions on the fly. It's similar like sitting in a hot seat, but they were cool as cucumbers. Those ladies were confident, they were wise, they knew things, they understood the metrics. When you have a strong building principal that has either been coached, supported, or built to an unbelievable extent, outside of the guiding force of the superintendent who establishes the direction, your building leaders are the most important factor in school achievement.
So as I come back on live, that was a video that looked at one segment. That's our Datacom process. It was day 2. It captured a day where we were able to walk our Moonshot School, which kind of we're going to get into in a little bit, highlighting that partnership, as well as everything that I just said, creating a balance between accountability and support, and creating in capturing those kinds of conversations within a culture that allows everyone to engage in really hard, difficult conversations, but conversations in which you feel safe and comfortable to risk sharing a change in practice, or to risk trying something that hasn't been done yet, or risk questioning why something the district is saying doing something. And as a result of that environment, those relationships that we've created, the school district of Indian River County continues to improve. So thank you, and I look forward to engaging in conversation a little bit later.
Thanks. And Dr. Hogan, do you have any quick reflections on what he said before we move on?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's just such a great example of so many of the key factors that we see in the active implementation framework. So focusing on habits as the driver to effective change, you see that that's a huge driver, is that you're creating a system in which it starts to naturally occur. Everything's moving forward as a driver. A focus on the long term by sharing the goal with everyone in the organization, and intimate involvement with the community, focuses on the sustainability and the redundancy so that it's not about one person, it's about the whole team, but that's driven by an amazing leader. And a focus on the agile continuous improvement model, because as Dr. Moore mentioned, it's a lot of times we see this happening in 1 year as a mandate, and he's moved that process to 9 weeks and focused on accountability with data. And that is the crux of really the scientific process, which is using data to make those decisions and creating the time for teams to work together to make those decisions. So it's really exciting to see what's happening.
Thanks. I would say that before Dr. Moore came, we had the community piloting all sorts of programs centered on data, and the Campaign for Grade Level Reading said, after a few years, piloting is great, but we really need population level change. And because our community held the goal, we attracted talent that we didn't even know existed. Our ambition now, Dr. Moore came in and said, please scale this work. We don't need to pilot it. And the community stepped up and invested and scaled it. Our ambition now is that Dr. Moore is not the exception, but the norm. Every citizen deserves a superintendent with the knowledge and skills of Dr. David Moore. And that is one of the reasons we are here, and we're actually documenting the work to share it more broadly as we go forward. But with that, let's turn it over to Liz and Dr. Thompson.
Thanks, Barbara. So it's my honor and privilege and pleasure to introduce Dr. Nell. She is a friend, a fellow traveler on this work. She's an amazing mentor, a leader. And if you've ever had the opportunity to go to Big Sky in the summer, where she hosts her Big Sky Literacy Summit, you are in for really a treat. She talks about how she is part of her own transformative reading teacher group, but you will be transformed if you have an opportunity to participate in the work and any kind of learning or sharing that Dr. Nell is involved in. So, excuse me. So now I wanted to kick it to you. You know, the science of reading has become quite a buzzword. When COVID happened, I got together with many of the colleagues that you know from the Reading League, and we put together a little purple book to try to get out of ahead of defining what is the science of reading, and then so that people could be better informed and then understand what it is and what it is not. It's not a curriculum, it's not a political agenda, it's not a fad. But we also know that understanding the science of reading requires we understand the science of learning and what does it mean to teach and so forth and so on. And you do such a nice job of contextualizing this and unpacking these terms and the science in a way that we can all understand it and then know how to feed that into this beautiful systems work that Dr. Moore has set up and that Tiffany has shared, you know, what that looks like in using implementation science. So with that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate being here. I'm grateful for what you are doing, the Learning Alliance and Indian River School District. What a partnership. What an opportunity for all of us to grow in understanding partnerships and the level of persistence and determination people have to raise the bar in this work. So I'm really grateful for that. Go ahead and advance the slide. To Liz's question, discussing sciences. And, you know, it's true story that just a month or so ago, I reorganized this slide to put the science of reading as the final science. Grateful that Dr. Hogan and Dr. Moore chimed in to really address the idea that this is a massive, complex ecosystem that we're working with, and everybody's school district is different. And the children we serve and the families we serve and the history we are coming in with is different everywhere. So I really commend the journey that we've talked about thus far, because Dr. Moore has shown us that you can't do this work without leadership and really giving credit to that building of strong momentum. The law of the big Mo is real. When you have momentum in a district and you have people who've laid the groundwork before you, it is easier to walk in and elevate the dialogue and bring excellent system systems into play, which is where Dr. Hogan took off in implementation science. Having those systems and having the knowledge about implementation. I'm going to give one nugget. I really believe as a transformational coach and a leadership coach is what I do. I'm working in school districts all the time, is we have to have sincere dialogues about de-implementation in this work. What isn't working? And really understand what the yes now, maybe later, and no never lists are for us as leaders and educators doing the boots on the ground work. And to get to where Liz was asking a question, like, how do we leverage the science of teaching, the science of learning as real strong components of this rich, complex leadership approach? We have to understand that all of our students deserve direct, explicit, systematized instruction that really meets their needs. And that is through differentiation. And that's that science of teaching that Anita Archer has been so amazing in teaching us about over the decades. And knowing that some of the teachers at Indian River and at specific the Moonshot School now have had the privilege of learning that science of teaching, they are opening up their understanding of what it means for the scholars to receive information, to be within that science of learning, that we have to understand that attention, that engagement, the distributed practice, the interlead practice, how we design the instruction of the reading and writing, right? That large interdisciplinary body of science that informs us about how to make a more literate society depends upon all of us leveraging all of these knowledge bases for reaching that next level of innovation within our community. And after Tiffany and Dr. Hogan were talking, I was like, you know what? We need the science of sustainability. We need to understand how we sustain. We need to understand how we replicate Dr. Moore and the Learning Alliance and partnerships and really building this work to show others and build demonstration districts that our nation can build off. So go ahead to the next slide, because our nation needs us to, in this national landscape. Liz, you were talking about, how do we leverage this to meet all the students' needs? And I think this is a very important, I put the numbers up there for Florida in their NAEP scores at the top, but I'm going to talk about the bottom boxes first. On a distribution, a normal distribution, what we find in the population of students we serve is that there's a consistent number of students who are dyslexic. And as Dr. Hogan and I also would like to bring out is that there are students out there who have a large percentage of developmental language disorders, not in this graphic, but what the point of that is that about 10, if you add that to say 15 plus 50, there's about 65% of the students that in this graphic say we need systematized, explicit, direct instruction, which is that science of teaching. Because why? Because the science of learning is saying that the way they'll best receive it is through very clear, very explicit, and very sequential teaching. And interestingly, Florida's NAEP statistics say that 61% of the students are at basic or below basic. So I think there's a little bit of a correlation there. Like if 65% of the students need this very clear, very systematized, very informed instruction, and 61% of the students are below basic, there might be a high percentage of students who are out there who need us to rally around the science of teaching, the science of learning, and application of the science of reading. Because there's 35 in that last 5 that really are probably going to get it in spite of what we do. And interestingly, in Florida, 39% of the students are proficient or advanced, right in that same number bracket. So I would like to say that in this, what I love about Indian River and understanding, I've been with them for 2 days of my life now in policy, practice, and performance seminars, is that in the Moonshot School, they've reached 64%. They don't have these numbers of students hanging out in below basic. They have pushed the innovations. They have pushed the boundaries. They have said, let's organize our systems and get this right. So the next slide. Because this has to happen for all students. And I always like to say we have to be have our attention on being very intentional. In Florida alone, students who are Hispanic and Black the statistics haven't changed since 1998 in NAEP statistics. So to the point of the grade level reading campaign, we have a lot to do around marginalization. And a lot of that has to have us as leaders understand that this literacy crisis is really a leadership crisis. It's a leadership crisis. And Dr. Moore is showing us that by leading this work and giving credit where credit is due to the teachers, to the teams he's working with, to the partnerships he has, that he's leveraging those things to really raise the bar and actually remove the barriers for those who need us to, so they can access what they need and then elevate into grade level performance. So go ahead to the next slide. And we do that in ensuring that we address levels of change. And in working with this group now, just hanging out with Barbara, Liz, and now Dr. Moore, and Dr. Moore had a really, really complex graphic, and he even said these, like, might not be able to read this one. So I have a much simpler graphic to show that we always have what's called, this district level leadership, that they're not as close to the child who may be struggling. They're not as proximal to the problem. And the next level leadership, bring in the next animation, please, is a school leadership. There, change is observable to the school leader in increments. Their urgency is always with the teachers and in the community they're serving. And they're very much in the business of continuously communicating the vision, the expectation, and here's where the results are. This is where we're going. They are the vigilant communicators, or the constant reminder of this is where we're going. These are the expectations. And the district leaders are helping the school leaders know that. And the next layer of this work and levels of change are that we have the teachers. Now, the teachers are what I call, go ahead and bring in the next graphic. We have the ground game. The teachers are the layer of innovation. And as Dr. Hogan and I have talked, they're the ultimate implementation scientists. They are in the moment. They're very urgent. So Dr. Moore has had years of focusing in on systems change and assessment systems and curricular systems and walkthroughs and what we're doing and how we do it, what the schedule is and exactly what happens. And every day that teacher shows up, and their level of urgency is for exactly the students in front of them. They're being very much supported by the systems of the upper game, the air game, but they need to be very urgent in the moment. And the level of change is much quicker, much faster. And in this, what happens in time, and what I'm seeing and I know is happening in Indian River, is that, go ahead to the next slide, please. We can put this into a pundit square and pull through all the animations for me, please. Just put them all on the board. And then I'm going to talk about it. This pundit square is showing us that knowledge is on a continuum and curriculum is on a continuum. So for about 3 years, Indian River has been implementing and pouring into teachers, implementing a curriculum, pouring knowledge into teachers. And in the Moonshot schools specifically, there's an incredible amount of resource pouring into it. And what's happened in the beginning is you have low teacher knowledge and a new curriculum. It moves to high teacher knowledge to new curriculum. And then you move over to the right, and you still may have, some teachers have low knowledge, but they have an existing curriculum, so they're further down the road. But it's up in the right where innovations start to happen. And this is where I believe innovations for our students who are marginalized and we're seeing gaps is where we have to say, we have high knowledge now, we have an existing curriculum, we have data on the table, and now we got to get curious about being disrupted in how we've done things, because it maybe isn't working for the final 25% or the final 35% in the case of the Moonshot School. So go ahead to the next slide. And if we keep that awareness and bring in all the animations here, the ground game now has high knowledge and they have high expertise with delivering a curriculum that they've been asked to deliver on. And they have trust, they have credibility, and they have positive, sustained examples of excellence. And so the air game, Dr. Moore and his cabinet, and all of you out there who are part of leading the systems and ensuring that those things are in place so the teachers can do their excellent, high-quality instruction, we now see what they're doing, and the data is showing us that if we're plateauing or if there's a next incremental level of what we need to do, we give the air game, the team on the air game says to the ground game, hey, I see it. I trust you. I have credibility. It is time to differentiate and innovate at a higher level, because your level of knowledge with where we are is showing me that we need to take one more step and disrupt what we're doing. So go ahead to the next slide. And for me, what does that freedom look like in those fences? I'm sorry, I didn't state. The air game has to say to the ground guy, hey, I'm going to give you freedom in the fences. Here are the fences. The data's here, the curriculum's here, and now let's go deeper. Let's go to diagnostic, prescriptive instruction for our students. And if this core resource isn't meeting the needs of this last 25% or 15%, we have to question and disrupt our thinking and saying, is fidelity to something that isn't working maybe where we're getting sticky? What if the first moment we started instruction in a child's life, we did diagnostic prescriptive instruction and we met them where they were at immediately? I have many a story about children who don't know their alphabet and end up in first and second grade and are being held accountable to grade level vowel instruction and they don't know their alphabet. So I really question, what is it about differentiation that we have to get clear on? And I say that one of the things to have freedom in the fences is to understand that the students are at the core of what we do. To differentiate means that we truly get curious about how to innovate around differentiation. And that means diagnostic, prescriptive, direct, explicit, sequential instruction. And this may differ from what has been happening in core to really maximize on that potential for that change and innovation. And the next thing I challenge lately across the nation in the work I'm doing, and I know Tiffany, Dr. Hogan's doing this too, is that one of the greatest innovations we could probably do to build and close some gaps and prepare students for the level of content learning and the depth of knowledge they're about to learn is to open their world of language through oral language instruction. And we now have about 3 evidence-based curriculums on the market, which has not been true in the last decade, but we do now more than ever before. It's time to start opening up to how could we change language development. And true to grade level reading, 2 goals is to really develop that child before kindergarten. And I think in Indian River, that is part of the story too, to close those gaps, to differentiate even before the kindergarten door opens, to develop that language even before it happens. So, you know, Liz, you asked, like, how do you bring in the science of learning and the science of teaching? And then how do we start to think about closing those gaps? And I think that all of this together, it has to be said that to truly differentiate, you have to think about exactly how that student is receiving information in the science of learning, where their language is and how they're being informed through their instruction, so the science of teaching, so we can deliver on the promise of teaching all children to read at grade level. So then the last slide is, I think ultimately we want to lead, all of us on this team here, and support systems that get first instruction right. So our teachers feel really confident in that first instruction delivery. To do this, we need those assessment systems to inform us at the detailed level of what kind of curriculum needs to be delivered and what kind of instruction needs to be delivered. So once you reach that high knowledge level with educators, giving them that really fine-tuned Ferrari curriculum that gets after diagnostic prescriptive instruction in Tier 1 for foundational skills to close those early literacy gaps in language and literacy. So thanks for letting me speak to that, Liz.
You got it, Dr. Nell. And always it's a pleasure to hear you speak, and I learn something every time. And I take frantic notes with your little catchphrases. And it's no probably coincidence that you and Dr. Hogan are also speech language pathologists by training first and foremost, and how that needs to really be brought to the forefront to inform how we look at how do we teach reading and writing, because it is a language-based skill and it relies on our language system. So I want to introduce Leslie Connolly, who is going to look at what is this innovation and put into practice. Barbara mentioned when Dr. Moore came to this district, he said, we want to stop piloting, we want to take things to scale. And he invited us to really partner with a school, and it wasn't any school, it was one of one of our most challenging schools. And really what would it look like for this public-private partnership at the Moonshot School. So what does it look like to create a Moonshot School? And Leslie Connolly is in charge of the Moonshot School's professional learning. She coordinates all things there. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and she is amazing in terms of the work that she does on the ground. And we are 3 years into this learning journey as a Moonshot School. So Leslie, I take it home.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, I'm Leslie Connolly. Hello, everybody. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. You asked earlier why we do this work, and I just wanted to give you a little bit more background about me. A fun fact, I'm actually a Vero Beach Elementary alumni, and my first teaching opportunity was also at Vero Beach Elementary. So not only is the school true and dear to my heart, but this town and the families in it are very special. And I owe it to this community and students like this little girl right here on my right, everything I can to reach our goal. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background about our school and where we are and what our population is, we are pre-K through 5th grade. Our student race, you can see the different percentages on the slide here. We're also about 81% economically disadvantaged, but that's really only the families that are reporting. We really think we have more than that. We have about 25% of students that have disabilities here, and we're about 8% that are considered our ELLs. And then what's not on this slide, we have about 43 families that are considered homeless or displaced at the moment. So next slide. What makes us different, right? What makes us unique about Moonshot School? We have an acceleration team. So you can see that we have 3 coaches, literacy specialists here, and they actually focus just on K-2. And each one of them takes on a grade level. So they are focused on those teachers and what those teachers and students need to make growth and proficiency, not only with our teachers with teaching, and but with our students and where they are in their learning. If you go to the next slide. We have also an arts integration specialist, Debbie Arsenault, and I'll explain a little bit more about what she does later on in my slides. And then we have a family success coach, and these 2 positions are very unique to our school. No other school has them in our county. And then, of course, I cannot forget the Moonshot Puppet, as he's very instrumental in the learning with our students. And I'll actually share a little bit more about that later as well. We could go to the next slide. So at the Moonshot School, we really are trying to create a culture of collective efficacy. We really want to be that hub for learning, and what does that look like? So we really ground our work in the science of reading, and we continue to learn and grow each year with each other. In the summer of 2023, we had our first annual Summer Literacy Institute, and we again focused on the science of reading and how our curriculum aligned to it. This was a time to also build our culture and teacher collective efficacy. We had 80% of our teachers attend that summer. This past summer, we had 95% of our teachers attend. And honestly, technically, we had 100%, just one was online because she had surgery, so she couldn't attend and had to do it virtually. But the teachers, they attend prior to contract time, and we were able, because of our partnership with the Learning Alliance, we were able to provide them compensation for the week. We can go to our next slide. So the learning can't stop there. As Dr. Nell said, you really do need teachers with high level of knowledge, right? So we want to continue that knowledge base throughout the year. We have monthly after-school professional development, and they are given by our teachers. We also have the micro-credentialing, which is a partnership through AIM Pathway that the Learning Alliance pays for our teachers. And we have 69% of our teachers that have completed the first course of the science of reading. And once they complete the course, we use the district walkthrough forms, which is one of those sustainable approaches to continuous improvement that Dr. Moore was speaking about earlier. And this gives teachers and coaches that immediate feedback for improvement. And then they can earn badges in the high yield strategies. And then, of course, receive compensation for that hard work. And again, that is done through the Learning Alliance. We can go to the next slide. So again, the learning doesn't stop there. It's one thing to attend these workshops, right, and get that knowledge base, but it's another thing to implement the learning. So how do we hold everybody accountable? So you heard Dr. Moore share the impact of those sustainable systems, and at the Moonshot School, we're able to implement these systems with fidelity. And like I said, everybody is accountable, from leadership to teachers all the way down to the students. And it really all starts with that collaborative planning. Most schools have one 45-minute a week planning with their team. And as most of you know, that is obviously not enough time to really drill down into what instruction looks like. So while we still have that weekly time, we are also able to offer extended collaborative planning through some creative scheduling. So every 6 weeks, the teachers have an hour and 15 minutes, totaling 6 hours of time, that we're able to come together for that week and really dive into the how of instruction. And then we follow up collaborative planning and professional learning with coaching. The partnership with TLA, says the literacy specialist, as I was saying earlier, we have one per grade level in K-2, which allows our 3rd to 5th grade district literacy coach to focus on the teachers in those grades. So most schools only have one literacy coach, maybe supporting 15 to 20 teachers, and we're able to have multiple. So that structured collaborative planning and the right coaches are very instrumental to the student growth and proficiency. But however, what's really both empowering and impactful are our demonstration classrooms. They open their doors to their colleagues, they open it to district, they open it to experts such as Dr. Nell, who was able to come in November, but not only to share best practices, but to also receive that feedback. They want to know it, they grow from it. And we have 17 demonstration classrooms this year. And they can't wait for those next steps. And they try it, and then they present it at the Moonshot Monday. And that is how we're really trying to build capacity here at the Moonshot School, because teachers truly learn from their peers and other teachers. If I could go to the next slide. So we spend just as much time learning and sharing best practices around the language side of the rope through our arts integration. We are the only school that has the arts integration specialist, and that is funded through the Learning Alliance. She is instrumental in our professional learning, collaborative planning, and she also coaches teachers in the classroom with their students. And honestly, she's such a rock star. She takes classes throughout the day as an extracurricular with a drama club after school as well. So you can see in these pictures on the far right, at least in my picture it is, it's Moonshot. And how do we inspire writing? Our kids get to write to Moonshot, and the Moonshot writes back. So he plays a pretty big game in our school, or role, should I say. If you can go to the next slide. All right, so if you're looking here, this is not fluff. They are culminating showcases, and they hit multiple standards for students to be able to demonstrate their learning while building up their oral language, communication skills, and also learning to work collaboratively with one another. And this all starts in kindergarten. We invite families in each semester to learn side by side with their child as they share what they've learned. So this is one way that we're bringing our families in as well. And if you go to the next slide. So again, we're creating a culture of collective efficacy through innovations after school as well. You heard the Learning Alliance share some of what they provide. Our school is a little different because we do have so many resources throughout the day that our after school looks a little unique to what their traditional after school is. But we want to tap into the talents of our students. So we do the tutoring first, and then students are able to join an interest club. So we have cheer, we have baking, sports, we have a yearbook club, and we're about to start a Rhoda Kids Club where they take a service project. So we have a lot of things going on that taps into the whole child. If you can go to the next slide. Right. And then we have many partnerships. Debbie Arsenault, the Arts Integration Specialist, she's able to connect us with the many different partners throughout our community to give our students multiple exposures to opportunities that they might not ever have. So with the opera, with the ballet, with the Indian River Clay Club. So there you can just see we have many just experiences for our students here. If you can go to the next one. So we want to involve our families. And here we have a success coach who focuses on family engagement and attendance, because if kids don't come to school, they're not going to learn. So that's really huge for us. And you can see some pictures here, but just to give you a little bit of impact around having a success coach, our orientation this year was 83% of our families compared to last year, which was only 43%. And she's just a year into this position. So you can see she's definitely plays a huge role in the impact. And then this year we had over 500 of our families attend our fall festival. And we have a literacy committee here. So everything we do in school, after school, it's all based around literacy. And we do put some math in there as well. We don't want to forget our math folks, but really literacy is the big key. So we had games, we had all different types of activities based around literacy. And that top photo is actually one of our teachers who wrote a book. So the Learning Alliance sponsored the first 100 books for families, and she was Meet the Author, and she wrote a little message for all of our families. So it was a big hit. And then we also, through the Learning Alliance, we were able to partner with Scholastic and United States of Readers. And so our kids are building up their home libraries, and the kids have to go home to their families, pick out the books together. They bring the flyer back, and then it's a big opening for the books, and they bring them home. So it's one way that we're involving our families as well. And then the next slide. But what's the data saying, right? Dr. Moore shared his systems around data, and through this is just one data point, but when he compared our growth from the last state assessment to this year's first state assessment, you can see that Vero Beach Elementary made the most growth in comparison to all of our schools. And that's also comparing it to both our title schools and our magnet schools. So you can see that we are outpacing them with all the resources that we have and everything that we've implemented here. And if you wouldn't mind going back to the next slide, just going back to why we do the work that we do, just with one of our students, this sweet little girl right here, just to give you a little background. She came to us in first grade from Chile. She only spoke Spanish. And of course, she has to take our state assessments in English. And she's performing in the 7th percentile, moving on to second grade last year. And her initial test was the 9th percentile. So again, having all those resources, the knowledge and skills that our teachers have, the coaches, and everything that we have put in place here. She is now in 3rd grade, and she just took her mid-fast state assessment and scored a level 3. So we can assume that she is probably going to score a level 4, a predicted level 4 or 5 by the end of the year. But she is just one of many of our students that on stories around growth and proficiency, but really without the strong leadership of a superintendent such as Dr. Moore and his habits and systems that he has in place and that continuous improvement cycle, a strong school principal, which we have here, and that unwavering belief and support and partnership of the Learning Alliance and the resources that they provide, this wouldn't be possible. So I strongly suggest you build those partnerships. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Leslie. I think it's, I'd just love to hear from Dr. Moore reflecting on what he's heard. He asked us 3 years ago in the moonshot is, John F. Kennedy, how do we get a man to the moon and safely back within a decade where there's no known blueprint? So we always ask our superintendents, what's next? How can we support you? And it was his vision of having a moonshot school to create a hub for systems change. So I'd love, Dr. Moore, for you just to talk about your, vision and where you think we are on this journey.
So it's interesting. I didn't realize what we were creating when I made that initial ask. And I think what we have created in hindsight is something that I don't think exists anywhere else. It is our own lab school. About 76% of our teachers that have been hired in the last 5 years since I've been here do not have a background in education. They are second career educators. And we needed to solve that problem. We also had a retention problem. We, as did the rest of the nation, in terms of being able to recruit and retain quality teachers. So as we began to think about what's next, we wanted to solve a number of problems with the Moonshot School. So it is a lab school design. We have all of the extra resources that are there to help build a system that can be observed in real time. So being able to articulate continuous improvement, being able to articulate implementation science is one thing, but actually going and actually seeing it done and seeing an instructional strategy being implemented in a classroom with very similar children in your school drastically accelerates the longevity and happiness of teachers across our county. So we use it not only to kind of put a stake in the ground to hit that 90% and show the rest of the world it can be done. We use it to grow the rest of the system. So the credentialing that Leslie referenced, you can see it in real time, very, very strategic across the system. And it really, really helps us hold ourselves accountable to our way of work. I have a school board, absolutely. But the Learning Alliance is our true thought partners in this work. And it is engaging in a dialogue, not around politics or not around any the other operational issues that, unfortunately, I get to deal with. It is solely focused around literacy. And it is in helping us re-envision or think differently about what public education is going to look like. We had performance policy and practice oh goodness, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Feels like it was yesterday, to be honest with you. But pretty much all of the facilitators that are here today, we sat around and just really had some dialogue and conversation, open-ended, free-flowing. But my team that was there, we've probably had 3 or 4 additional conversations about re-looking at our work just solely based on that conversation. That never would have happened if it wasn't for this partnership. So is it additional work? Yeah. But is it the absolute right work that is paying dividends hand over fist in terms of student outcomes? Absolutely. So what we envisioned it 3 years ago, and what it is really becoming, is far exceeding what we dreamed up 3 years ago. So it's super exciting.
Tiffany or Dr. Nell, either you want to make any comments?
I think one of the things that is, I have lots of notes written down, and I always think of situations where, you know, Dr. Moore, you've just been given an award, and you know, it's definitely a massive pat on the back. However, the entire system is what's getting the award. The efforts of many, the ground game, the air game, everybody over time, the momentum that was happening, all of that stuff. And I think what I see happening in the need in our nation is to have demonstration districts and the courage to start being innovative in a way that says, I personally am grateful that you've opened the door and been vulnerable and been willing to be disrupted. I work in many districts that we say, let's just open our doors, let's get feedback, let's just see where we're at, and see if our paradigm, it needs to be disrupted, and that if we need to change. And so I just highly encourage you to go the extra mile. You know, things get really lonely once you go past everybody else. Now you're out in the final stretches of the marathon, and it's like, maybe just go ultra on people, you know, go way farther than you could have ever imagined. And that piece of it inspires me, that you're at a point now where you could just go exponential, which is to figure out that final 36% at the Moonshot School. What kind of differentiation needs to happen? What kind of schedules need to happen? How much teaming do teachers have to do? What curriculums are needed? And how do you start building earlier in children's lives? And so I'm excited for you. And I think that this is an opportunity for you just to what we would call in leadership, lift the lid. The lid's high, but go higher, you know, go higher.
I'm not sure what I can say beyond that, because Nell, you have such a beautiful way of just pulling out the exact right words. And I just think, yes, exactly that.
Well, as I said at the beginning, we didn't know what we were looking for in terms of a superintendent, and we feel very lucky and honored to have Dr. David Moore, an innovator and systems thinker here. And, you know, Liz did drag me to Dr. Thompson's conference, Big Sky, and last July, and it was just fabulous how you laid out. And I dreamed of this webinar and of our relationship together, and that's where I met Dr. Hogan. So I think, you know, you guys all work with practitioners with real problems to unlock all children, and the Learning Alliance is honored and thrilled to know all of you and to be working with all of you on this great work, which I consider the most important work in the United States of America, to make sure the American dream is there and available for all children. Liz, you have any closing words? We have like 4 minutes left.
Well, I just noticed that when this webinar started, there was a tribute to Barbara Bowman in the beginning of it. And as a pioneering force in education, and she was an unwavering champion and a visionary. And her life was shaped by ensuring that all children have an opportunity to thrive, particularly children in under-resourced communities. And she promoted leadership, and she promoted specialized training for educators. And it's nice to know, you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, people before us that have been engaged in this work. And I'm sure she would have been very impressed and proud to see this collective alliance of people coming together, learning together, how to and ensuring that we do best by kids, as Dr. Moore always says. So thank you all for this opportunity, and thank you to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, because you were birthed at the same time the Learning Alliance was. So we've been on this journey together.
And a shout out to Liz and Barb, because you are showcasing how to include the community. So when I visited, it was my biggest question was, how is this sustainable? and how are you rallying the community around? And it really is, you have so many partners that now this goal is shared by everyone in the community, not just the district, not just the Learning Ally, but every person in that community is now holding this goal and holding space for it and making it a priority. And you are a model for that.
Well, I think when
well s-
Dr. Moore
well said.
came, his vision was to see a billboard on the side of the road saying, Indian River County, welcome to Indian River County, the literacy capital of the nation. And what he didn't know is that was a vision that we had in a public reverse visioning, 10 years before him when we didn't even know what we were looking for. So, like minds, like souls, dedicated to high expectations, is what we need, is happening here and what we need nationwide. And we thank everybody on it. And Leslie Conley, you've done an unbelievable job and grown in unbelievable ways. Your job is very challenging. And every time I see a teacher, I'm like, you're the most important individual on the face of this earth. Thank you for doing the work you do every day.
Ditto.
So yeah, go ahead, Dr. Moore. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, what Barbara said, ditto.
Yeah, I think I feel that I'm in the presence of greatness. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your schedule today to share your story about what's going on in your community. You are an exemplary community in our grade level reading network. So I just want to appreciate you. I do have 2 slides really quickly to share, and I know we're coming up on a minute. So Sierra, if you could just put them up for just 1 second. There is an open invitation for all of you to learn alongside Learning Alliance. They have spoken a lot about continuous improvement and that we are on the learning journey together. So there is a QR code, and I do want to remind everybody that's still with us that we will be sharing out the entire slide deck, so you'll all have access to all of the beautiful slides from today. And one more slide, which is just a plug of our sessions that are coming up. Today is a double header, so there is one this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So again, my gratitude to all of you, to our speakers and the panel today, and to everybody that's joined us. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.